The morning sun beat down on Naval Amphibious Base Coronado with the kind of heat that made the asphalt shimmer. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Chen stood at attention outside the main training facility, her uniform crisp despite the warmth. At 34 years old, she had spent 12 years earning her place in the Navy, working twice as hard as most to prove herself in a world that still questioned whether women belonged in combat roles. Today was different. Today, she wasn't here as an instructor or an officer. She was here as a demonstration participant in the annual Special Warfare Combat Skills Exhibition, an event that drew Navy SEALs from across the country. 282 of the military's most elite warriors would be watching. Sarah had been selected to demonstrate advanced hand-to-hand combat techniques, a recognition of her expertise in martial arts and her years teaching defensive tactics. But not everyone was happy about it. "Look at this," came a voice dripping with contempt. "They're really going through with the diversity show." Sarah didn't turn. She knew the voice belonged to Lieutenant Marcus Webb, a SEAL team instructor who had made his opinions about women in the military abundantly clear over the years. Beside him stood his constant companion, Lieutenant Derek Moss, another instructor who shared Webb's outdated views. "Should be interesting," Moss replied with a sneer, "watching her try to keep up with real warriors." Sarah kept her eyes forward. She had heard it all before. The jokes in the hallway, the whispers in the mess hall, the deliberate exclusion from informal gatherings. She had learned long ago that the best response was excellence, not engagement. The demonstration coordinator, Commander James Patterson, approached with a clipboard. He was a fair man, a veteran SEAL who judged people by their abilities, not their gender. "Lieutenant Commander Chen," he said with a respectful nod, "you ready?" "Yes, sir," Sarah replied. "You'll be demonstrating defensive techniques against multiple attackers. We have 2 volunteers from the instructor cadre." He glanced at his list. "Lieutenants Webb and Moss have volunteered." Sarah's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Of course they had. This wasn't about education or demonstration. This was about humiliation. They wanted to embarrass her in front of nearly 300 of the Navy's best. "Understood, sir," she said calmly. Patterson looked at her carefully. He wasn't a fool. He knew the dynamics at play. "This is a controlled demonstration, Lieutenant Commander. Safety protocols apply to everyone." "Of course, sir." Within the hour, the massive training hangar was filled with SEALs. They sat in bleacher-style seating arranged in a semicircle around a large mat area. The energy in the room was electric, the kind that comes when warriors gather to watch a display of skill. But Sarah could feel the undercurrent of skepticism. She was the only woman demonstrating today, and many in that room had never seen a female service member in a combat role. Commander Patterson took the microphone. "Gentlemen, our next demonstration features Lieutenant Commander Sarah Chen, who will show advanced defensive techniques against multiple attackers. Lieutenant Commander Chen holds black belts in 3 different martial arts disciplines and has been teaching hand-to-hand combat for 8 years. Polite applause rippled through the crowd, though Sarah noticed it was noticeably quieter than for the previous male demonstrators. Webb and Moss stepped onto the mat, both standing well over 6 feet tall, both outweighing Sarah by at least 80 pounds. Webb flexed his shoulders and shot a grin at the crowd. Moss cracked his knuckles loudly. Patterson continued, "This demonstration will show how proper technique and leverage can overcome size and strength advantages. Lieutenant Commander Chen will defend against a simulated attack scenario." What happened next would be talked about in Navy circles for years to come. Webb stepped forward before Patterson could outline the specific scenario. "How about we make this more realistic?" he called out loudly, ensuring everyone could hear. "In real combat, the enemy doesn't follow a script." The crowd murmured. Patterson's face hardened. "Lieutenant Webb, this is a controlled." But Webb was already moving toward Sarah, his face twisted with arrogance. He stopped just inches from her, towering over her 5'6" frame. "Kneel before me," he said, loud enough for the entire hangar to hear. The room went silent. Part 2. The words hung in the air like a physical presence. Sarah stood perfectly still, her face calm, but inside, her heart pounded with controlled fury. This wasn't just disrespect. This was a deliberate attempt to degrade her in front of the entire Navy SEAL community. "Excuse me," she said quietly, her voice steady. Webb smirked, playing to his audience. "You heard me. You want to play soldier with the big boys, then show some respect. Kneel." Moss stepped up beside him, emboldened by his partner's audacity. Maybe she needs help understanding basic commands. Commander Patterson was already moving forward, his face red with anger. "Lieutenant Webb, you are out of line. This demonstration is—" "Oh, come on, Commander," Webb interrupted, his voice carrying across the hangar. "We're all warriors here. If she can't handle a little psychological pressure, how's she going to handle real combat?" Some of the SEALs in the crowd shifted uncomfortably. Others watched with interest, waiting to see how this would unfold. Sarah could feel the weight of 282 pairs of eyes on her. She had a choice to make. She could step back, let Patterson handle it, file a formal complaint. That was the proper procedure, the safe route. But Sarah Chen hadn't gotten where she was by taking the safe route. And something told her that walking away now would confirm every doubt that these men had about women in combat. "Commander Patterson," she said calmly, never taking her eyes off Webb. "Permission to adjust the demonstration scenario." Patterson looked at her carefully. He could see the steel in her eyes. After a long moment, he nodded slowly. "Permission granted, but safety protocols remain in effect." Sarah turned her full attention to Webb. "You want realistic? Let's make it realistic. No script, no choreography. You and Lieutenant Moss try to take me down however you want. Full contact." The crowd came alive with murmurs and whispers. This was unprecedented. Demonstrations were carefully controlled, choreographed for safety and education. What Sarah was proposing was essentially a real fight. Webb's smirk widened. "You sure about that, sweetheart? We might mess up that pretty face." "I'm sure," Sarah replied. "But we need to make it interesting. When I win, you both publicly apologize and request transfers out of the training command." Moss laughed harshly. "When you win, you're delusional." "And when we win," Webb added, stepping even closer, using his size to intimidate, "you resign your commission. Admit that you don't belong here and walk away from the Navy." The hangar erupted in shocked conversation. This had gone from a demonstration to something else entirely, a challenge that would have real consequences. Patterson held up his hand. "Now wait just a minute." "I accept," Sarah said clearly. The commander looked at her in disbelief. "Lieutenant Commander Chen, you don't have to do this." "Yes, sir, I do," she replied quietly. Then louder for everyone to hear. "I've spent 12 years proving myself. I'm tired of having to prove it every single day. So let's settle this right now in front of everyone." Webb was practically grinning now. He thought he'd already won. In his mind, there was no possible way this small woman could defeat 2 trained SEAL instructors. He saw this as his opportunity to drive home his point that women didn't belong in combat roles. "Your funeral," he said. Patterson looked like he wanted to shut the whole thing down, but he also understood the dynamics at play. If he stopped it now, Sarah would be seen as weak, as needing protection, and Webb would claim victory by default. The commander stepped back to the edge of the mat. "Medical team, stand ready," he ordered. Then he looked at all 3 participants. "This ends at first submission, or if I call it, understood." They all nodded. "And gentlemen," Patterson added, his voice hard as iron, "if I see anything that looks like you're trying to seriously injure Lieutenant Commander Chen out of malice rather than competition, I will personally ensure you both face courts-martial." Webb and Moss took their positions on one side of the mat. Sarah stood alone on the other side, looking small and vulnerable in comparison. She rolled her shoulders once, loosened her neck, and settled into a ready stance. The crowd had gone completely silent. 282 Navy SEALs watched, most expecting to see their colleague humiliated. Some felt uncomfortable with the whole situation. A few quietly hoped she would prove herself. Patterson raised his hand. "Begin." For a moment, nobody moved. Then Webb nodded to Moss and they began to circle Sarah from opposite sides, a classic two-person attack formation. They were coordinating, using their training and size advantage. "Last chance to kneel," Webb taunted as he moved. Sarah said nothing. Her eyes tracked both men, her breathing steady and controlled. She had trained for this her entire adult life, not for demonstrations or show, but for real combat. Webb struck first, lunging forward with surprising speed for a man his size. At the same instant, Moss attacked from behind. What happened next took less than 3 seconds, but it would be replayed in the minds of everyone present for the rest of their lives. Sarah moved like water flowing around stones. As Webb lunged, she pivoted, using his own momentum against him. Her hand shot out, striking a precise nerve cluster in his extended arm. Webb's fingers went numb instantly, his attack faltering. But Sarah was already spinning, using Webb's larger body as a shield against Moss's charge from behind. Moss, committed to his attack, couldn't stop in time. He collided with Webb, and in that fraction of a second of confusion, Sarah struck. Her elbow cracked against Moss's temple, controlled, precise, but hard enough to stun. He staggered backward. Webb recovered quickly, his pride wounded more than his body. His face flushed with rage. "You're going to regret that," he snarled, abandoning any pretense of controlled demonstration. He came at her with full force, no longer treating this as a competition but as a battle to be won at any cost. This was what Sarah had expected. She knew men like Webb. When their egos were bruised, they became reckless, angry, and angry fighters made mistakes. Webb threw a heavy right cross, putting his full weight behind it. If it connected, it could do serious damage. Sarah ducked under it smoothly, and as his momentum carried him forward, she grabbed his extended arm. Using a joint lock technique she had perfected over years of training, she twisted his wrist and elbow in opposite directions while simultaneously sweeping his legs. Webb went down hard, face first onto the mat. The sound of his body hitting echoed through the silent hangar. Moss, seeing his partner down, charged with a roar of fury. He was no longer thinking tactically. He just wanted to hurt her. He dove at her legs, trying to tackle her to the ground where his size and strength would give him an overwhelming advantage. Sarah had anticipated this too. As Moss dove, she jumped, letting him pass beneath her. As she came down, her knee drove into his lower back, right on the kidney. Moss gasped in pain and rolled away, clutching his side. The crowd was on its feet now, the silence broken by gasps and shouts. Nobody could believe what they were seeing. Webb pushed himself up, his face contorted with humiliation and rage. Blood trickled from his nose where it had struck the mat. "I'm going to break you," he hissed, all pretense of military professionalism gone. He came at her again, but this time Moss joined him, both attacking simultaneously with coordinated strikes. They were fighting dirty now, trying to overwhelm her with sheer aggression. Webb grabbed for her throat while Moss went for her legs. For the first time, Sarah showed emotion, a flash of cold fury in her eyes. These men weren't just trying to win. They were trying to hurt her, to punish her for having the audacity to stand up to them. She had spent 12 years holding back, being professional, taking the high road. 12 years of insults and obstacles, and having to prove herself again and again. 12 years of men like Webb and Moss trying to make her quit, to break her spirit. Not anymore. As Webb's hands reached for her throat, Sarah grabbed his wrists and dropped her weight, pulling him forward and down. At the same time, she brought her knee up hard into his solar plexus. The air exploded from Webb's lungs and he doubled over, gasping. Moss had her leg now, trying to take her down. Sarah didn't fight it. Instead, she went with his pull, using the momentum to drop her elbow onto the back of his neck. Moss's grip loosened and she rolled free, coming up in a crouch. Both men were hurt now, breathing hard, but they weren't done. Their pride wouldn't let them quit. They looked at each other and seemed to make a silent agreement. No more tactics, no more technique, just raw, brutal force. They rushed her together, trying to use their combined weight to simply crush her against the mat. It was the kind of desperate, all-or-nothing move that Webb should have known better than to attempt. But rage had overcome his training. Sarah saw them coming and made her decision. She could evade, keep moving, wear them down. But that wouldn't send the message that needed to be sent. These men had demanded she kneel. They had tried to humiliate her in front of hundreds of her peers. They had put her career, her entire military future on the line. It was time to end this. As they charged, Sarah dropped low and swept hard at Webb's lead leg. At the same instant, she drove her palm up into Moss's knee, striking it from the side at exactly the angle where the joint was most vulnerable. The techniques were taught in advanced combat training, specifically forbidden in sparring for their high risk of injury. But this wasn't sparring anymore. This was war. The sound of Webb's leg breaking was like a gunshot in the silent hangar. He went down screaming, his tibia fractured just above the ankle. Moss's knee gave out with a sickening pop, the ligaments torn, and he collapsed beside his partner, howling in pain. Sarah stood over them both, breathing hard but controlled, not a mark on her face. The hangar exploded with noise, shouts, exclamations, the scrape of boots as people rushed forward. The medical team sprinted onto the mat, converging on the two injured men. Commander Patterson stood frozen for a moment, his face unreadable. Then he walked slowly onto the mat, stopping in front of Sarah. "Lieutenant Commander Chen," he said quietly so only she could hear, "did you have to break their legs?" Sarah met his eyes steadily. "Sir, they demanded I kneel. They tried to end my career. They attacked with intent to cause serious injury." She paused. "I responded with appropriate force to end the threat." Patterson studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "So noted." He turned to the crowd, raising his voice. "Medical team, transport the injured to the base hospital immediately." Part 4. The next hour was chaos. Medics worked to stabilize Webb and Moss, who were both screaming in pain as they were loaded onto stretchers. The 282 Navy SEALs who had witnessed the confrontation stood in small groups, talking in animated voices. Some looked shocked. Others looked impressed. A few looked troubled by what they had seen. Sarah sat alone on a bench outside the training facility, her hands wrapped around a bottle of water she hadn't drunk from. The adrenaline was wearing off now, leaving her shaky and exhausted. She had just broken the legs of two fellow officers in front of hundreds of witnesses. Her career was either over or about to reach heights she'd never imagined. There would be no middle ground. Commander Patterson emerged from the building and sat down beside her without asking permission. For a long moment, neither spoke. "That was quite a demonstration," he finally said. Sarah let out a breath that was almost a laugh. "That's one way to describe it, sir." "There's going to be an investigation. You know that." "Yes, sir." "Webb and Moss are already claiming you used excessive force, that you attacked them without provocation." Sarah's jaw tightened. Of course they were. Men like that never took responsibility for their own actions. "There are 282 witnesses who saw them attack me first, sir, who heard them demand I kneel, who watched them escalate beyond demonstration parameters." "I know," Patterson said, "and I'll be providing testimony to that effect. So will many others." He paused. "But breaking their legs, that's going to be hard to justify as defensive action." "They were trying to crush me, sir. I had seconds to respond. I used the techniques I was taught, the same techniques the Navy trains us to use when our lives are in danger. Patterson nodded slowly. That's the argument we'll make. He looked at her directly. Are you okay, really? Sarah considered the question honestly. I don't know, sir. I've spent my entire career trying to fit in, trying to prove I belong. And in one moment, I just threw all of that away. I'll either be held up as an example or drummed out of the service. You didn't throw anything away. Patterson said firmly. You defended yourself against two men who attacked you out of malice and prejudice. Everything that happened today is on them, not you. Before Sarah could respond, a younger SEAL approached hesitantly. He was maybe 25, with the lean build and watchful eyes of someone who had seen combat. Ma'am, he said, sorry to interrupt, I wanted to say thank you. Sarah looked up surprised. For what? My sister graduates from Annapolis next year. She wants to be a Marine, and she's scared that she won't be taken seriously, that she'll spend her whole career fighting for respect. He paused. What you did today, it matters. You showed that skill and determination beat size and aggression. That's what I'm going to tell her. He nodded respectfully and walked away before Sarah could respond. She felt tears prick at her eyes but blinked them back. Over the next 30 minutes, more SEALs approached. Not all of them. Some clearly disagreed with what had happened, and that was their right. But enough. Enough to show her that the Navy was changing, even if that change was slow and painful. One grizzled Master Chief, his face weathered by 30 years of service, stopped and simply said, I've been in the team since before you were born. That was the finest display of combat technique I've ever seen. Semper Fi, Lieutenant Commander. Then he walked away, leaving Sarah stunned. She was Navy, not a Marine, but the sentiment was clear. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the base, Captain Richard Morrison arrived. He was the commanding officer of Naval Special Warfare Command, and his presence meant this had escalated to the highest levels. Patterson and Sarah both stood at attention. At ease, Morrison said. He was a tall man with silver hair and the calm demeanor of someone who had seen everything. Lieutenant Commander Chen, quite a day you've had. Yes, sir. I've reviewed the security footage from multiple angles. I've interviewed Commander Patterson and 17 other witnesses. I've also read the medical reports on Lieutenants Webb and Moss. He paused. Would you like to know what I found? Sarah's heart pounded. Yes, sir. I found that 2 instructors in front of 282 witnesses verbally assaulted a fellow officer. They demanded she kneel, a clear act of insubordination and harassment. They then attacked her with what multiple witnesses describe as intent to cause serious harm. They escalated a controlled demonstration into a personal vendetta. Morrison's voice grew harder. In response, you defended yourself using techniques taught by this very command. Techniques designed to end threats quickly and decisively. He stepped closer. Lieutenant Commander Chen, you are not being charged with anything. Webb and Moss, however, will face courts-martial for conduct unbecoming, assault on a fellow officer, and bringing discredit to the Naval Special Warfare community. They will both be dishonorably discharged. Sarah felt her knees weaken with relief. Thank you, sir. Don't thank me, you earned this. Morrison looked at her carefully. But I need to ask you a question, and I need an honest answer. Did you intend to break their legs? Sarah met his eyes without flinching. Sir, I intended to end the fight in a way that would ensure they couldn't continue to attack me. Breaking their legs accomplished that goal. Morrison studied her for a long moment, then nodded. Honest answer, I respect that. He handed her a folder. Read this when you have time. It's a new assignment. Sir, you're being transferred to the Naval Special Warfare Center. You'll be heading up a new program training all special warfare candidates, male and female, in advanced hand-to-hand combat. What happened today showed that we've been teaching techniques without fully understanding their psychological applications. You're going to change that. Sarah opened the folder. scanning the first page. It was a promotion to commander and a position that would make her one of the most influential instructors in naval special warfare. "Sir, I don't know what to say." "Say yes," Morrison replied simply. 6 months later, Commander Sarah Chen stood in front of a new class of SEAL candidates. The training facility had been redesigned under her supervision, with updated equipment and new protocols that emphasized technique over raw strength. The class before her was diverse, men and women of different sizes and backgrounds, all united by their determination to become part of the Navy's elite. The story of what had happened that day in the hangar had spread throughout the entire military. It had been told and retold, sometimes exaggerated, sometimes minimized, but always with the same basic truth at its core. A female officer had defended herself against two men who tried to humiliate her, and she had done it in front of 282 witnesses. Webb and Moss had been court-martialed as promised. The proceedings had been swift and decisive. Both men received dishonorable discharges and were banned from all military installations for life. Webb had tried to paint himself as the victim, claiming he was just testing Sarah's combat readiness. But the video footage and the testimony of hundreds of SEALs told a different story. The real impact of that day, though, went far beyond two disgraced officers. Applications from women to naval special warfare programs had increased by 40%. Complaints about harassment and discrimination had actually gone up too, but that was a good thing. It meant women felt safe enough to report what they experienced. And those complaints were being taken seriously now, investigated thoroughly, with real consequences for offenders. Sarah had received hundreds of letters. Some were from young women inspired by her example. Some were from male service members who thanked her for standing up for principle. A few were hateful, from people who believed women had no place in combat. She read them all, filed them all, and let none of them change her course. As she looked at her new class now, she saw the future of naval special warfare. It was more inclusive, more skilled, and more professional than ever before. "My name is Commander Sarah Chen," she began, her voice carrying across the training floor. "Over the next 12 weeks, I'm going to teach you how to survive hand-to-hand combat against opponents who are bigger, stronger, and more aggressive than you. I'm going to teach you that technique beats strength, that discipline beats anger, and that respect is earned through action, not demanded through intimidation." She paused, meeting the eyes of each candidate. "Some of you have heard stories about me, about what happened 6 months ago in this very facility. Let me tell you the truth of that day. I didn't break those men's legs because I wanted to hurt them. I did it because they gave me no choice. They attacked me with intent to end my career, to prove that I didn't belong here. They were wrong." She began walking among the candidates. "Every single one of you will face moments in your career where someone doubts you, where someone tells you that you're not strong enough, not fast enough, not tough enough, and you will have to decide how to respond. You can back down, let them win, accept their limitations, or you can prove them wrong." Sarah stopped in the center of the mat. "But here's what I learned that day. Proving them wrong isn't about revenge. It's not about humiliation. It's about showing up, doing the work, and being so undeniably excellent that doubt becomes impossible. Those two men attacked me because they were afraid. Afraid that if I succeeded, their entire worldview would be challenged. Afraid that they might not be as special as they thought they were." She smiled slightly. "They were right to be afraid, because you, all of you, are the future of this command, and you're going to be better than we ever were." The class erupted in applause. Sarah let it continue for a moment, then raised her hand for silence. "Now let's begin. Pair up. I want to see what you can do." As the candidates moved to follow her instructions, Commander Patterson entered the facility. He had been promoted to captain and now oversaw all training operations at the base. He watched Sarah work with her students, correcting form, offering encouragement, pushing them to be better. After the class ended, he approached her. "You've got a good group there," he said. "The best," Sarah agreed. "How did the review board meeting go?" Patterson smiled. "The Navy is officially adopting your training protocols across all special warfare programs. By this time next year, every SEAL candidate will learn your methods." Sarah shook her head in wonder. "6 months ago, I thought my career was over. Now I'm changing how the entire Navy trains its warriors." "You earned it," Patterson said. "Speaking of which, there's someone here to see you." He gestured toward the entrance, where a young woman in a Marine Corps uniform stood waiting nervously. Sarah recognized her immediately. She had the same features as the young SEAL who had thanked her that day 6 months ago. "Ma'am," the young woman said, saluting crisply. "Second Lieutenant Jessica Morrison, United States Marine Corps. My brother told me I should come meet you." Sarah returned the salute. "He's a good man. How can I help you, Lieutenant?" "I just finished my training at Annapolis. I'm heading to infantry officer course next month. I'm going to be the first woman in my family to serve in a combat role." She paused. "I'm also terrified that I won't be good enough, that I'll let down everyone who's counting on me." Sarah smiled and put a hand on the young officer's shoulder. "Let me tell you something, Lieutenant. That fear, that doubt, it never completely goes away. I still feel it sometimes. But you know what I learned? The fear means you care. It means you understand the weight of what you're trying to accomplish." "How do you deal with it?" Jessica asked. "By remembering that I'm not alone, by knowing that every woman who came before me fought the same battles, and by understanding that every woman who comes after me is counting on me to make the path a little easier." Sarah paused. "You're going to face people who doubt you, who question whether you belong. Some of them will be hostile. Others will be genuinely concerned for your safety. How you respond to them will define your career." "What would you do?" Jessica asked. Sarah thought back to that day in the hangar, to the sound of Webb demanding she kneel, to the choice she had made to stand her ground. "I would show them what you're capable of," she said simply. "Not with words, but with actions. Be so good that they can't ignore you. Be so professional that they can't dismiss you. And if someone tries to tear you down, you stand your ground and prove them wrong." Jessica straightened her shoulders. "Yes, ma'am, that's what I'm going to do." As the young Marine left, Sarah felt a sense of peace settle over her. The road ahead would still be difficult. There would still be people who questioned whether women belonged in combat. There would still be obstacles and challenges and moments of doubt. But something fundamental had changed that day in the hangar. She had stood in front of 282 Navy SEALs and proved that courage, skill, and determination mattered more than size or gender. She had refused to kneel, and in doing so, she had helped lift up every woman who would follow in her footsteps. That evening, Sarah returned to her small apartment on base. On her desk was a framed photo from that day, not of the fight, but of the moment after. In it, she stood surrounded by dozens of SEALs, all of them looking at her with respect. Commander Patterson had given it to her with a simple note: the day respect was earned. Sarah picked up the photo and studied it. She could still remember the feeling of standing on that mat, her heart pounding, knowing that her entire future hung in the balance. She remembered the fear, the anger, the determination. But most of all, she remembered the moment when she realized she wasn't fighting just for herself. She was fighting for every woman who had been told she wasn't strong enough, for every young girl who dreamed of serving her country but feared she wouldn't be accepted, for every future generation of warriors who deserved the chance to prove themselves. She set the photo back down and looked out the window at the training facility. Tomorrow, she would be back on that mat, teaching the next generation of SEALs. She would pass on everything she had learned, not just about combat, but about courage, dignity, and standing up for what was right.